Everybody knows this is heaven to me. I don't know what it is you see. Flowers and fields and skies are blue. I'd trade it all for one more day with you. Everybody knows this is heaven. Even the fools can see it this time. And all my friends are still sleeping under a blanket of bells and chimes. I heard you say I missed the warning shot, a volley of anger and a pain. I would have brought you with me, but I forgot. I guess some things never change. I guess some things never change. Well, the siren was unintentional. I could hear the birds, and I wanted to sing that song for you guys. And now there's a siren, which is a rare thing in my neck of the woods. Anyway, how you guys doing? Welcome back to the podcast, Noel Casler Podcast, episode 110. Let me make sure this mic is working right. Check. 1, 2. Here we go. All right. Hope you could hear that song. It's going to be a bummer if you can't. Not that the song was worth listening to, but the audio needs to be dialed in to start this baby. That was an old song of mine. I felt like singing it because you probably can't hear it now, but there was a bunch of birds outside. And, sorry about that. This is why they have engineers when you do radio shows. I put on the second mic to pick up the guitar, and now it's all complicated. My little studio here. But welcome back. I got some new monitors today from Denmark that I've been saving up for a year. So I got some nice sound. Apologize again for the road noise. It's because of these two microphones. And I don't have the ability to pause it. Here, let me pause. All right, there you go. I was able to figure out how to pause the thing. So anyway, a mess of a start to the show, but I'm glad to be here and talking to you guys. It's a beautiful day here in the Hudson Valley. As I said, you could hear all these birds outside singing. Got a lot of greenery and a lot of wildlife, and I've really been enjoying myself today. A measure of peace I haven't felt in a while. Nice weather yesterday, nice weather today. Getting outside, taking care of some plants and stuff like that. Not the kind you smoke, but the kind you look at. You know, I have these irises that come up by the pond, these yellow irises, and they're quite amazing. And I need that. I need the nature, as we all do, as I talk about a lot, because it's certainly been stressful on the news front, you know, and we don't like to see that, right? Trump shouldn't be in the position he's in right now. I don't want to jump right in talking about him, but it's hard to avoid. The headline I saw right before this show was, you know, they found another flag in front of Alito's house on Long Beach Island, which is LBI in New Jersey. It's an upscale kind of summer place, and Jersey upscale. You know, it's not Nantucket. That's a diss. And I don't care. But anyway, you know, it's a nice place. I used to go there in high school and stuff. But he had one of these like tree of life flags or whatever they call it. It's kind of that cypress tree on a yellow flag and a green tree. It just means you're basically like some militant racist kind of like freak. And we already learned that he had the upside down American flag in front of his house during January 6th, right? While that trauma was going on and while the Supreme Court was deciding things about the election, as they still are, right? They're now deciding if he has immunity, and we'll find out in the next 2 weeks what their verdict is. And judging by the flags outside of his house, you can probably guess what that is. And it won't really, I mean, it'll matter, but what matters is they ran out the clock on that case, and he won't be standing trial for it before the election, and he probably won't be in the classified documents case down in Florida, which Judge Eileen Cannon has slow rolled. And that's sort of the topic, is how, it's not that the system has rotted from within. It was designed to do this. This is the result of 40 years of conservative dogma, conservative ideology, turning people against their own government, against liberalism, against progressivism, telling these sort of Johnny Paycheck type kind of guys. I mean, that was an actual person, but Joe Lunchbucket, whatever, snarky term you want to apply to these people that aren't necessarily bad people. There's nothing wrong with working class, middle class people. I come from those roots, hardworking Irish Catholic people. Right? People that benefited from labor unions, that benefited from the GI Bill, that benefited from a government with social safety nets, with Social Security. Because if you're not wealthy enough to start saving from your, for your retirement and having a 401k because you're worried about putting food on the table for your family and paying your rent or paying your mortgage, you need somebody to make sure you're going to be okay on the other end. And you're paying that money. You're paying into Social Security, and they want to take it away. Speaker Johnson was on a Republican research group before he was a speaker in 2019. And he suggested like a $750 billion cut to Social Security. That was literally in this proposal. This is before he was speaker. So imagine what he'll do now if he's speaker and Trump is president. They'll gut Social Security. They'll gut Medicare. They're already gutting Medicaid. Like, that's insane. That's not what a civilized society does. A civilized society takes care of their own, takes care of, young people and old people and everybody in between. Everybody gets a fair shake. You work hard, you got something to look forward to at the end of your career. You're not going to fall below a certain line, and they're going to be happy letting people fall below that line, because that was the idea. That's what, the John Birch Society that, melded into the Koch brothers kind of Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation, all these supposed think tanks in D.C. were really just mean-spirited operations where they wanted to get as much money up to the C-suite level, right? The corporate, heads, the guys who own these companies wanted to make a lot of money. It used to be back in the day, CEOs in like the 60s and 70s who lived in, say, Greenwich would have competitions. Who could wear a more modest watch, like a Timex or whatever? It was about being somewhat understated. And those guys were, say, making 200 times what their lowest paid employee made. Now they're making 10,000 times what their lowest employee makes. And they're buying a big mega yacht while their employees are sleeping in their cars and working shifts at Amazon, and they can't afford rent, but they have to work all the time. That's what Wall Street, that's what, the sort of economic model that was ushered in the Reagan era. It started a little bit before on Wall Street, but borrowing money to buy companies, gutting the companies, using that leverage, leverage buyouts called LBOs. I don't want to get in the weeds, but, it's a way to basically dismantle a company, take a tax write-off, and walk away with a tons of money while putting people out of work, while ending lives, because you put somebody out of their job, they got a whole host of other problems. So that's what you saw happen. That's what Wall Street did in the 80s under Reagan, under all the deregulation and the environmental deregulation. They sort of created this rust belt, right? And you saw entire towns become impoverished, places where you could once make a decent living working in a factory, working in manufacturing, and buy a house and put your kids through college, were now closed up, and they were ghost towns, and all the other problems that come in after that, the poverty, the addiction, the alcoholism, the abuse, the violence, all these systemic things that happen when you don't have, what you need to be function normal, right? If you can't function normal, things get dysfunctional, right? All of that is a result of these lack of social safety nets and this greed, this unfettered greed that started with Reagan, marrying it with patriotism, right? The unions are bad. I would argue with guys in high school whose parents were, obviously Republicans and stuff about the evils of labor unions. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're in Putnam Valley right now. Half the people in this town are in a union. That's the reason people have houses and health insurance is because of unions. But this sort of every man for himself, libertarian, like douche bro attitude began then, and now it's just it's reached its flowering moment under Trump and under this cruelty and this picking on everybody beneath you, demonizing other people, dressing up like the dear leader as they're showing up at his trial in their blue suits and their red ties, and they're showing up with thugs to intimidate him, people like Bernie Carrick, who was a scumbag, who during 9/11 when all the first responders were working on the pit, all the cops, he was in an apartment that was provided for the first responders, having affairs with his mistresses. The apartment was so guys could take a rest, when they were, exhausted from exhuming their coworkers out of this pile of rubble, right? They were supposed to go up to this apartment and take a rest. Bernie was up there sleeping with his mistresses and embezzling money, just like his boss Rudy Giuliani did, 9/11 was a paycheck for those guys, and they exploited it. And now he's showing up with Trump at court. He's showing up with Chuck Zito, who's the head of the Hells Angels in New York City before they kicked him out because he was too Hollywood. He's a thug. He's the guy who tried to kick my ass at The Apprentice after party because I took his picture with a couple of Hells Angels with their jackets on. I got no beef with the Hells Angels. I know a lot of the Oakland guys. Crosby was friends with those dudes. But, Chuck Zito's a thug. He's there to intimidate. And that's the whole point of this stuff. They've begun their full court press on intimidating the American electorate. And that's what they're going to do on election night. That's why they're getting 150,000 volunteers, lawyers, and MAGA types to show up and harass people at the polls. And we really have to pay attention to what that means, what they're really attempting to do, because it'll be terrifying and it'll cause a constitutional crisis right away. And my take on it is that Trump will say it like at 8 o'clock at night on election night, like, I won, don't believe anything else you hear, stop voting, stop counting the votes, I already won. They're trying to steal it again. Patriots, defend your democracy, defend your country. And he's going to try to get all these yahoos out there in their pickup trucks with their guns, stand up, stand back, or stand by, or whatever the stupid Proud Boys thing was, right? That Matt Gaetz repeated. Matt Gaetz showed up at the trial last week and repeated that thing. Mr. President, I'm, standing back and standing by. They're trying to intimidate us. And these guys are fools, okay? Don't be intimidated. These men are cowards. Anybody who does all that toxically masculine stuff, that's not a real man. That's not a tough guy. A tough guy doesn't tell you how tough he is. I've known a lot of tough guys, and I've known a lot of fake tough guys. And Trump likes the fake tough guys. That is not to say they're not dangerous. They're in fact more dangerous, right? Because they don't know how to value anything. They're trying to always please and impress the boss. And that becomes like a snake pit because they're all backstabbing and backbiting. And that's what'll happen, If Trump seizes power, what he'll do is every town and state will have its sort of MAGA captain in it, right? It could be the chief of police, it could be the mayor, some kind of like figurehead who's aligned with Trump, and that guy will set the pace, right? He'll set the tempo of intolerance that will fall down on these towns, right? The sheriff, whatever it's going to be nasty, and if you're not on Team Trump, you're going to be out of luck. And that's what Governor Abbott did, right? Greg Abbott pardoned a guy in Texas last week who'd been sent to jail by a jury of his peers for 25 years or whatever because he murdered somebody. He said, I'm going to go kill a Black Lives Matter protester. He got in his car and he went there and did it. Shot somebody, killed him, went to prison. Governor Abbott's pardoning him, letting him out, sending a clear message. If you're on Team Trump, if you're killing the right kind of person, you won't pay a price for that in Texas. And we all know what that kind of person is, right? It's somebody who's progressive. It's somebody who cares about human rights. It's somebody who isn't trying to suck up to bullies, right? And MAGA are people that are trying to suck up to bullies. And the problem is Trump has been masterful, as dumb as he is, and he's a dumb guy. He can't read. I'm telling you, that's not a joke from my set. I know I say it in that, but the dude really can't read like a syllable word. His family hid that because it's a sign of weakness to ask for help. So they pretended like he wasn't a dumbass because he was the, scion who was going to take over for his dad because his other two brothers were drunks, which is no shame in that. Addiction runs in his family just as it does in mine. And Trump's an addict, but he was a speed addict, so he was a little more functional than his alcoholic brothers. But he had a learning disability, or that's how I would take it. I mean, he seemed pretty dyslexic to me, which there's no shame in that. But again, he just didn't do anything to help himself. He just paid other people to take his tests and did all this crap. So then he becomes, a CEO or the head of the Trump organization, which was a mob money laundering op from the beginning. He was using mob steel and mob concrete, and any corner he could cut, he always did. And he's an intellectually curious guy. And he was just all about show. Here's me in my gold toilet. Here's me in my supermodel with the big fake boobies. All this kind of dumb shit that appealed to idiots, right? That appealed to people who have been so dumbed down culturally that they think that's powerful, that they think that's attractive, And he's been masterful at now aligning that with patriotism. As I've talked about a million times on this podcast, the iconography of the Screaming Eagle tattoos and the giant pickup trucks and the Blue Lives Matter flags and all this kind of crap has really seeped into red state America. And that's what you have to be aware of. That's what we need to change now. There's an incredible moon outside my window, just a big yellow full moon. So I don't want to get distracted, but I just noticed it. We have a beautiful planet. We have a beautiful country full of smart, kind people, and we have a bully who's sucking the oxygen out of the room for 8 years because people are making money off it. And there's so many people in the establishment that want him to win again that they're basically like, this is our chance to always be awful people and not be held accountable for it. And they're backed by big money, big corporations, big donors are funding this thing, and they're facing a left with a very unpopular president, which is always surprising to me because if you look at the numbers of the Biden administration, they're doing a great job compared to where we were in 2020 and the mess that Trump created. Biden's doing a lot of good things, and I've talked about some of his legislative agenda and the results of that. And now all the Republicans are taking credit for it, right? I just saw Lauren Boebert taking credit for a $50 million bridge project in Colorado that she voted against. And you can take that all over the country because they have no morals. They don't care about lying, and they're assuming their people are too stupid to know better at this point. And their assumption would be correct. Because if you're listening to Fox News or you're listening to your buddy at work, you don't know what reality is. You're pumped full of hate. You're pumped full of misinformation that is designed to work on you emotionally, that's designed to work on your anger, right? And it's going to trigger you. And you're going to associate the things they're talking about with other people in your family, your father, your grandfather, right? You probably come from some generational cultural ignorance, if not outright racism and xenophobia. And that's a toxic brio. And Trump's good at exploiting that. He's masterful at that kind of stuff. And it's become such a machine at this point that all he needs to do is show up a couple hours late and read off a teleprompter, or stand there like a moron if the teleprompter stops working like it did at the Texas NRA this weekend. So he just stood there for 2 minutes because there's no words in his head. There's no agenda. There's no, here's my vision for what I'm going to do. Here's my legislative stuff that I'll do in his second term. He just stood there like a fucking moron. And the people from Texas stood there waiting for him to start talking again because they're white guys from Texas going to an NRA event. So that tells you everything about them already. And I love the people of Texas. I give Texas a hard time. I love a lot of the culture. You know, a lot of my favorite songwriters and authors are from Texas. Culturally rich place. Politically backwards as hell, you know, ever since we lost Ann Richards. You know, the Republicans who took over are mean-spirited, broken men, from the governor on down to the state's attorney general to their senators. You know, it's a despicable political situation, and it's much of the South and the red states are like that. You know, from Kristi Noem shooting her dog to Governor DeSantis kicking off Freedom Summer, where it's illegal to light up a bridge any other color than red, white, and blue, right? This is all by design because it works on dumbasses who think that's patriotism. You know what patriotism is? It's taking care of people. Patriotism is building roads and bridges and hospitals and paying your nurses and your teachers and making sure no kid goes hungry, you know? Making sure people got what they need to get a leg up, holding out a helping hand to somebody else who wants to come to this country and work hard like somebody in your family did. You know, it's not slamming the door behind them and demonizing them so some guy who lives on Fifth Avenue in Palm Beach can get on his private 747 and fly back to his golf course and assault women, you know, and brag about his idiot kids and let his kids get in on the act and then hand off the generational wealth. That's what they want. They want to control everything, and they want to dumb down the population and weaken them to the point that they can't do anything about it. That was the Koch brothers' plan. That's not hyperbole. That was literally the plan. That's why they back all of these politicians in North Carolina and Ohio and all these places that want to dismantle workers' rights. They want to dismantle Social Security and healthcare because they want broken people that they can use up and discard. That's how it works. That's what serfs were, you know, in Russia. That's what Putin does. You know, if you're friends with Putin, you profit and you make money, you know, until you cross him, like Boris, you know, Berezovsky or whatever his name is. I just saw a great play, Patriots, was on that subject, you know, Putin's rise to power and the oligarch who put him into power, and then he turned on him. You know, Putin turned on the oligarch, and the guy went into exile and was murdered, you know, by the KGB or by ex-KGB. So, you know, that's the plan. And that's been the plan since 2016. That's what Jared was doing. That's why he had back channels with Russia from the beginning. You know, that was going to be the deal. They were going to be the ruling family, the Trumps and all of their buddies, both internationally and in this country. And if you were in favor, you would profit and you would make money. If you were out of favor, you were shit out of luck. That's why, you know, there was no PPP, you know, for a lot of people, or PPE, protective equipment, right away. Remember when COVID hit and they wouldn't send it to Massachusetts and all these kind of places because it wouldn't benefit them electorally? That's insane. That's not how a government functions. That's how a bully functions. That's, you know, that's how a corrupt mob boss functions. And that's what these guys are. And for some reason, they're still popular. You know, Trump, you know, whatever you want to say about the poll numbers, they're not good. Okay? They shouldn't be anywhere near where they are. And if you say, you know, polls aren't correct, the things that were incorrect about the polls in 2016 benefited Trump, right? The polls were wrong because we thought Hillary was going to win. And what happened was all these idiots got in the voting booth, you know, because they've been hopped up on Russian disinformation and James Comey's 11th hour BS, and they pulled the lever for Trump. And they could do it again. Now they're saying they could do it again, you know, and the numbers are higher than they should be for him. They could be even higher than that, you know. And I'm not saying that to make you feel hopeless. I'm saying that to say, hey, there's still some time. You know, we got 5 months, but you got to really understand what we're up against, what we're facing, what the threat truly is. And you got to look at it from an analytical point of view. You know, you can't get caught up in the, well, I'm Team Garland. I don't want anybody to say anything bad about Garland. because I believe in that. Well, good for you. He seems like a nice enough guy, but he dragged his feet for too long, and I was saying in my car rants in 2021, like, time is not on your side. Don't sleep on this. You need to go hard on Trump right now because he's a master at dragging things out. And he's already, he appointed 200 judges or whatever. Biden just hit the 200 appointment mark. But Trump got a lot of judges, put on the bench, including Eileen Cannon, who was unqualified and is now hooking him up in a huge way. And she'll be on the Supreme Court if he gets reelected. Clarence Thomas or Alito, somebody will step aside and give the seat to a younger person who will make you miserable for the rest of their lives and take away your rights and take away your Social Security. That's what's going to happen, right? So you have to be aware of that. Tim Snyder, the Yale professor, had a tweet today, and he, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the essence was like you have to really understand what you're up against, and you have to look at it at an analytical point of view before you can really jump into the politics, And I think a lot of what we're facing now and a lot of what's weakening the Democrats is everybody's got their issue that they're mad about, right? And they want to make a stand on. And a lot of it's coming from a good place, and a lot of it's coming from you're sort of getting manipulated and hopped up on stuff. And you're thinking that the guy you're yelling at or disrupting is worse than getting Trump back in office. Nothing is worse than that. That's game over. Trump becomes president again. It's not like, oh, we get through it and he sends some mean tweets. He guts this place on day one. That's what Project 2025 is. If you're not friendly with Trump, you'll be out in the cold, and stuff gets real dangerous. We saw what happened in Germany, right? Think of the German people, Weimar Germany, those guys were sophisticated. They were educated compared to the MAGA voters, right? Berlin was the height of artistic ingenuity, shortly before Hitler came to power. And then he came to power and they burned all the paintings and all the books and stuff. And those guys who were educated, who were in touch with their humanity, obviously they were beaten down from World War I, and pissed off and feeling like, they got screwed. So they had the aggrievement, right, which people do in this country. But they were coming at it from a more educated place than your average Trump voter, which is the point I'm trying to make. And I'm not sure if you get it or if I'm making it inartfully, but what I'm trying to express is that is what scares me most, because we've seen the evil that men can do when they're manipulated by a charismatic dictator, right? And it's not a compliment to Hitler. I'm just saying his methed out craziness had an appeal to these freaking guys, and they turned on their neighbors and countrymen and stole all their shit and put them on trains and sent them to camps and killed them. 6 million people, in a civilized country. A lot of red states aren't civilized. That's not to diss everybody in the state, but I'm saying you got 40 years of dumbing them down. You got kind of jacked up morons that will be happy to carry out whatever sick, sadistic, depraved stuff Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller come up with and Trump signs off on. And Trump himself is a sadist. He wanted to build a moat outside the wall and fill it with alligators and snakes to attack migrants. He wanted to shoot protesters in the knees across the street from the White House. He asked a general to do that. Imagine that for a second. Think about a president sitting behind the Resolute desk telling a general, Mark Milley, to go shoot the college kids across the street in the park because they were embarrassing him by protesting, and everybody knew he went and hid in the bunker in the White House, and it made him feel emasculated, which is a lot of Trump's whole id is about, his lack of virility, his inferiority. It runs deep in that guy. The pathology is messed up. He is a messed up human being. So he's trying to lash out at people, especially women, And that's what's running our country. That's what ran our country for 4 years, and that's what's trying to run our country again. A broken, sadistic moron, And he's become a godhead figure to tens of millions of people that are just as broken, Not just as broken, but that are believing the bullshit. And that's terrifying. So you think about that. Think of Italians and Germans and, Spanish and the people that fell for fascism last time. And think of what their education might have been before that happened and compare it to some guy in Texas, who grew up on just Fox News and a racist old man and NRA dogma and all this kind of crap and thinks he's a soldier and a patriot. And now the great leader is asking him to defend his country. So in his mind, he's storming the beach at Normandy, right? He's doing the same thing that all these other great veterans have done, or patriots. In reality, he's not, obviously, right? But that's a powerful thing in a weak, uneducated psyche, and that scares me. That's what scares me most, because there's so many avenues to feed that poison into people, and there's not a lot of, antidote for it right now, right? The MSN is obsessed with Trump's trial. You turn on MSNBC, that's all you see. It's a podcast every night, essentially, right? It's a panel discussion, or people on a Zoom call talking for 6 hours from 4 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And I love Nicole Wallace. I love all those people, love them, but it's not dealing with the bigger picture. And they, Maddow obviously dives into it, and so does Joy Reid, and so does Nicole. My point is, there's a lot of money to be made in covering the craziness of Trump and the trial that's ultimately insignificant. That's not to say we shouldn't have it reported on. You shouldn't send great reporters down there, but you don't need 6 hours talking about it every night when all this other stuff is happening. He's building an army while we're talking about whatever such and such said in court. That's what's insane. It's insane that they'd send Caitlin Collins down there to tweet all day, when she's an anchor. If I got a show on TV at night at 9 o'clock, I'm not sitting in the courthouse all day. I'm trying to write as much as I can about what I want to tell you about all the different threats and breaking news we're facing as a democracy. The trial's going to be what it's going to be. I don't think the results will be, what people expect, and I don't think it'll really matter much either way. He's using it like he uses everything else to his advantage. He's using it as a way for the GOP to pledge fealty to him and show up dressed like him and stuff, because his followers didn't show up because it's hard to get to Lower Manhattan. You're not going to drive in from Pennsylvania. Go through the Holland Tunnel, find a place to park, and go sit there so you can cheer at a guy who gets out of his SUV and walks in the side door, right? So he made the Congress people come up, and they delayed a hearing last week, which was a bullshit hearing anyway. They were trying to impeach Merrick Garland, right? Who's kind of their best friend for dragging his feet. Not that he didn't appoint, Jack Smith, and not that Jack Smith isn't making up for lost time, but the clock's running out because you had the Supreme Court drag out, the D.C. January 6th case. You had Aileen Cannon drag out the documents case, And they just found out that he had, more documents in his bedroom when he found out, like, they had footage of the cameras and him moving the documents. He made Walt Nada move them where there wasn't cameras. I mean, it's a cut and dried case. The guy's a thief. He was selling that information, okay? He was selling it to the Russians. He was selling it to the Saudi Arabians. Anybody who wanted it, he was going to get it. When they were leaving the White House, they looked around for anything of value, and they took it. You remember when he was leaving, they were packing up vans and boxes out in the streets? You ever seen a president do that before? Of course not. He did it because he's a thief, and he was stealing, our documents, our national security. People spend their lives. My family, both of my grandfathers were in intelligence. NSA, and, my other grandfather was way high up, OSS, World War II intelligence, helped form the CIA, was Nixon's private envoy to Vietnam, got in a fight with Kissinger over bombing Cambodia, moved my family to Ireland. Longtime listeners know some of that story. But, a guy who would sit in the Oval Office all the time, and talk about all the things that we've had to do to protect democracy, all the sacrifices people make. There's a lot of faceless people that you never meet, that work on this stuff, that were endangered. After he met with the Russians, CIA guys informants started getting killed all over the world. You don't think he gave, Kislyak that information, Sergei Kislyak? Of course he did. Because he would find favor for himself in it. That's a transactional guy. That's the guy you don't want as president. You don't want the guy who's only thinking about himself and how he can make a buck out of the situation, right? You want the guy who understands the magnitude of the responsibility. You don't want the guy who isn't showing up until the Oval Office, doesn't walk into the Oval Office until noon so he can get high and watch Fox News every morning, snorting Adderall and strapping into his girdle and painting his face orange. That's a psychopath. How is that guy anywhere near the White House? How did that happen? As Americans, I'm somebody who obviously worked around the guy before it happened. And the night he was elected was one of the worst nights of my life because I knew what was coming. I knew who this guy was, and I did everything I could to stop it. Nobody knew who I was, and I broke my NDA, and I told shit, and I talked to Hillary's campaign, and then I became a stand-up comedian so I could talk about it on stage and get the biggest audience I could to just say, this guy's out of his mind, And the addiction stuff that I talked about, it wasn't like, oh, he does drugs. If you can do drugs and do the gig, fine. But if you're in active addiction, it means you're being run by your character defects, right? You're only thinking about yourself and self-centered fear. And that's the last thing you want in a leader. The last thing you want in a leader. Somebody sober, no problem. Somebody who's done some work on themselves, no problem. Somebody who's not an addict, by definition, no problem. But somebody who's in the throes of addiction is very dangerous because they're only going to think about themselves. And that's Trump. He's been an addict his whole life, and a deviant, a broken man. And I'm in recovery. I'm not dissing that kind of stuff. But, you don't want that guy as president. And you saw what happened. 1 million people died because COVID came and all he could think about was himself. So he was pretending like it wouldn't happen or wasn't going to be a big deal to the American people. And privately, he was telling Bob Woodward, like, this thing's terrible. It goes through the air. It kills you right away. Oh, my God, it's awful. He was saying that on the tapes to Bob Woodward in January, right? And in March, he's like, oh, it's going to go away. He wouldn't let the cruise ship land with the 50 people on it because he didn't want it to increase the numbers. And then it blew up. And then who did he put in charge of the response? Jared Kushner, and Mike Pence. And until he realized he wanted to be at the press conference. So he pushed Mike Pence aside. Kushner continued Googling what is COVID and put his buddy from college in charge of the stuff, and they figured out how to make a buck off it. And when they figured they couldn't make much money off it, they lost interest. And then they said, well, just don't wear a mask. Let's open it back up. And let's get a bunch of funding from the Treasury Department. We'll give PPP loans, and you apply, and you won't even have to pay it back. And it was like a trough that all the people friendly to Trump fed from. And not just Republicans. I know rock stars who got hundreds of thousands of millions. People, that was a scam that never went investigated, dude. And now they're mad at Biden because he's trying to, reduce student debt. People who can't afford to pay their loans, and they go after that, but they don't say anything about the Congress people. Tom Brady. What does Tom Brady need a PPP loan for? The student loan stuff was very helpful, very effective, and they fought him at it. I paid my student loans since 1996. I've never touched the principal. I sent $220 a month for 30 years, almost. And it's more now than I borrowed by over $10,000. It's just the rest of my life I got to send in this thing. That isn't right, And I've talked about this before. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me, but it's hung over me my whole life. Imagine if you have even bigger loans. I went to drama school. Mine weren't huge. Imagine you go to law school, medical school. You got crazy stuff. Or you went to, a scam school, and you're saddled with this debt. Because it disproportionately affects minorities. It affects women. It affects the same people that they attack and punish, And that's messed up while they're sending their kids to Harvard and country clubs and, handing off mediocrity in a generational way. That's what they're really fighting to protect is mediocrity. That's what they're scared of migrants for because they work so hard. They're not thinking they're going to take their job. They're thinking, they're offended by competence. You know, that's a lot of republicanism. They want you to just be dumb and wave a flag, you know, and hit your vape pen and go to Walmart and buy another flat screen and get your giant pickup truck and don't pay attention to climate change. That's a scam that the liberals want you to think, right? It's not a scam. It's so hot, it's unbearable in Florida now. It was 90-something degrees here today in the Hudson Valley. You know, it was 40 degrees last week, right? Temperature's crazy all over the place. That's from burning fossil fuels. That's it. That's why it's happening, you know, and greenhouse gases and methane, you know, from animal agriculture and stuff. The same kind of, you know, red meat, giant pickup truck. We should just have gas at $2 a gallon and drive a 10,000-pound truck that gets, you know, 12 miles to the gallon. It's insane. It's insane and it's stupid. And we've been living that way forever. In Europe, they've been driving small cars and paying a lot for gas the whole time because you should be paying a lot for something that's destroying your planet. It's not your birthright to have, you know, cheap gas. I'm not saying, you know, it doesn't hurt your pocketbook, but we need to move towards solutions. You know, what did Trump do? You know, he said to oil companies 2 weeks ago in Mar-a-Lago, you elect me, and on day one, I'll pull back Biden's environmental policies, his electric vehicle mandates, and all these kind of things that the auto companies are for, because they work, and they're good, and it's progress, and that's what anybody with a brain is going to want to be driving in a few years. You know, Trump's like, I'll take that all out on day one if you give me $1 billion from my campaign. Right? And he won't use the $1 billion on his campaign. You know, he'll put it in his pocket or pay his legal bills. But he said it. You know, it's on a recording. He said, give me $1 billion and I'll change policy. That's not democracy. That's not how it's supposed to work, folks. And Trump's so dumb and he's gotten away with it so long that he probably thinks that's how it's done. You know, he thinks that's probably how other people do it. And there's always some backroom dealing and special, you know, interests that have influence over politicians. But you don't have people saying out loud, I'll usurp, you know, the policies of the last guy if you cut me a check, to the detriment of the globe, of the entire planet that's warming at a rate that we're all going to fucking die, you know, if we don't get some smart leadership and do something about it. And that's the thing that offends me the most about the Trump era, is that we're like 9 years into it. And that's 9 years of progress that we've lost at a crucial time where we cannot afford to be talking about Trump's trial all day long and whatever scandal that no one's even talking about anymore because he did so many things. We can't afford the time we've already lost. We cannot afford another 4 years of this. Neither can the rest of the planet, because the rest of the planet, a lot of these people are in lockstep with the fascism that's happening here. Iran, China is backing, like the Russians, you know, in Ukraine now, essentially, you know, Chinese weaponry. Putin will try to march across Europe. You know, if Trump gets reelected, he'll certainly take Ukraine, which is already suffering catastrophic losses because they held up the funding for 6 months on Trump's wishes. They could have funded it back in October when they were running out of bullets. You know, waited till a couple of weeks ago because Trump said slow roll that. You could have had a border deal that would have had security at the border. But Trump said don't do that because Biden will get credit. And they're running on the chaos. The big swinging dick cowboys in Texas, it makes them feel like a man to go down the Rio Grande with their gun, you know, and pretend like somebody's an invader. Somebody's just coming to work hard, you know. I had a bunch of work done on the house recently, you know. And these guys, they come and they work so hard. They're so skilled. And a lot of these guys are from Latin America, you know, Mexico, South America. Incredible guys, incredibly hardworking. I've never even met a Mexican dude I don't like, or a Latin American. Like, I don't understand the venom that people have towards immigrants of any stripe, of any nationality. Don't you want culture? Don't you want some different food? Don't you want some spice, some different rhythms? You know, that's what makes America great. It's a melting pot. It's people coming from everywhere else, you know, and saying, This is what I got, and you get to sample that. You get enriched by that. You don't get enriched by like, monotheistic, like, bullshit, right? America, I eat cheeseburgers, like Trump is the most unsophisticated guy. He eats meatloaf and hamburgers, a shrimp cocktail every night. He has to have bigger shrimp than anybody else at the table. I'm not lying, okay? His restaurant in D.C., they got in trouble because he had a dinner one night with a couple of guests and they all had equal size shrimp and he freaked out. So they had to fly in large prawns, extra large, like those tiger prawns. So he'd have a big, ridiculous shrimp coming out of his shrimp cocktail, and the other guys would just have 16, 20-gallon shrimp. That's a true story. That's who this guy is. That's how disgusting and insecure and tiny a man he is. And he is holding sway over a huge swath of America right now, And if it was just Trump, it would be okay. But it's all these other weasels. Mike Flynn, who hasn't been stopped, who should be in jail, who's having rallies all over the country, flying around the country, training people, for whatever they're going to pull off, right? You have Bill Barr. You have all the guys who were up front witnessing it last time, endorsing him, saying they're going to vote for him. Nikki Haley said today she was going to vote for him. She did a whole scam, election. I always thought she was trash, to be honest with you, but her whole campaign was like she was the alternative to Trump. And what did the media do? They went along with it like she wasn't going to do what she did today all along. She probably hopes she can be VP. I told you when I was down in Florida, I was staying at this hotel. All these ex-military MAGA types were there too, and these guys were training for something. And they were well-funded and they were organized and they were going off every day and doing something and then coming back to the hotel and working out at night. And I wrote a piece about it on my Substack, and it really messed with my head because I don't know what they're up to. And all I could think about is, what if that's happening all over the country right now while we're paying attention to the trial, and while we're sort of retweeting whatever outrage of the day, Trump said, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or a Trump surrogate, and these people are terrorists. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a legislative terrorist. She was probably the one who dropped the pipe bombs in front of the DNC on January 5th. And I still don't understand how they weren't able to find out who that is, on Capitol Hill. A crime like that happens and it's like 4 years later and you can't figure out who did it. But these guys are, they're getting away with their chaos. I'm not saying they're going to win, but they're doing real damage, and they're sucking all the oxygen out of the room, and people are falling for the trap of paying attention to that and retweeting it and, showing the video and sending money to somebody who's just trying to build up their own organization instead of going into red states and talking to these people. Because that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to understand the cultural aspects of this. It's not the policy. You can't talk policy. These guys are beyond policy. There is no policy. The policy is Trump. Elect me. I'm the man. That's it. That's the policy. And trust me, it'll be great. I'll let you hate everybody you want to hate. Muslims, Mexicans, doesn't matter. LGBTQ, whatever. You'll be a patriot. You can have as many guns as you want. Elect me. That's it. That's the wrap. Where Biden's got all this actual stuff he's done, this infrastructure, decriminalizing marijuana at the federal level, working towards, he's done more environmental stuff than any previous president, and he's making up for things that got, attacked after Carter, after Carter was sort of manipulated out of office, right, with the Iranians waiting to release the hostages until Reagan took over. And then, Reagan was another, moron, but he had all these guys behind him who knew what they were doing, and they did some real damage, lasting damage. And that's what scares me about Trump, is that all these other guys got away with it last time, and they're emboldened now, and on day one, they're going to go in there with Project 2025 and with their corrupt Supreme Court, and they're going to do whatever they want to do, and we're going to suffer. And the people that vote for him are going to suffer too. So if you have any skill to explain to people that they're going to be the cannon fodder, they're going to be fed into the meat grinder with this kind of stuff, figure out a way to do it. Use your skills, use your talent and your light to say, don't you want your grandkids to live on a planet that's clean and look out at that beautiful moon and have flowers, and neighbors from, other places, and go to a school that's well funded with smart teachers that accept everybody and encourage you to be who you want to be? There's nothing wrong with being different. There's nothing wrong with somebody who has, gay parents. There's nothing wrong with a child who's gay, or a child who wants to transition or identifies transgender, or however they identify. That child is a gift. We're all gifts. We all have a light in us. We all have something to offer this world. We all have equal value in this world, right? Your aspiration should be, like when you get sober, there's a saying, be a worker amongst workers, right? That's what you want in a president. You want a president who understands the weight of the responsibility, but he as an individual sees himself as a fellow American. Biden does that. Obama did that. You know what I mean? Clinton did that. Clinton was good, really good. I was his escort a bunch at, you were the only guy in the room when he was talking to you. Trump doesn't. He pats somebody on the back and keeps walking. He's only thinking about himself all the time. It's all he's capable of, It's to our lasting shame that guy was ever in office. It's an embarrassment on the world stage that he is now the candidate again and as popular as he is, and a big part of it is because there's money to be made. There's enough meat on the bone for everybody in the media to keep the circus alive, and that should scare you, because that's not going to lead anywhere well, lead anywhere good, rather. So, those are my thoughts on that. I could get into more specifics, but I could also play more guitar. I went to Carnegie Hall last week. They did a tribute to the songs of CSN. Graham came and sang, and my buddy Todd Caldwell was the MD, and Todd and I lived on Stephen Stills' tour bus together for more than a few years. And Todd was in CSN. He was in the backing band. He's a B3 Hammond organ player, great musician. So now he was the MD at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hill was my old neighborhood in New York City. But same Carnegie, different part of town. But it was wonderful to see people up there. Todd Rundgren was there. Todd is God. When I was a kid, I lived in a tent on Todd Rundgren's property in Mink Hollow Road with my dad. My mom drove me up to Woodstock to spend the summer with my dad. This was in the 70s, mid-70s, and she followed the directions that he gave her over the phone in Maryland. And we got to the end of the road, we parked and walked along a path along a stream and came to a tent. And that tent was to be my home for the summer. He later, these were the hippie years, he later got an apartment and a few of them around Woodstock. But that first summer, I bathed in a stream and ate over a campfire, and it was on Todd Rundgren's land, Mink Hollow Road, if you know it. So my point is, it was good to see those guys. It was good to get out and listen to some music. Stephen Stills is in New York being honored on something, I'm told, and I'm just trying to segue from all the political talk. I'll end it now. If you want, you can sign up for my Substack. I'm always writing about stuff. It's a little more serious than my Twitter or my podcast. It's just me being a curmudgeon. Oh, I set up a Patreon if you want to support the podcast. It's Noel Casler at Patreon. It's like $4.99 a month. I put a song up on there. I'll put some more songs. I got some new monitors so I can mix some stuff. And, YouTube, I think you can support it right on YouTube. You can become a member if you want. So I'm going to try to do this more. I'm going to come up with a game plan for the election, because it really is all hands on deck. I'm not kidding myself that doing a podcast every 3 weeks is going to make a difference. So I'll do it all the time if it helps, because We have to come together, because that's my message, is it's not too late, but we can't sleep on this, and we can't get lulled into, just hoping it's going to work out and everybody's just going to vote blue, because they have contingencies. So we need to preempt that and just make it a wave, and that's why I always talk about the arts, because think of these things that we'd lose. Think of what our culture would be like with another Trump presidency. You want Kid Rock, playing at the inauguration or something? Who's just a complete scumbag, by the way. I worked with him a ton. Not like on his tours, but on TV shows and MTV shows and all that stupid shit. His crew hated him. That's always the judge of a guy, how he treats the people that work for him, Anyway, I'll shut up now. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Substack if you can. I know this was kind of a rambling one. It was a beautiful day, and I appreciate all your kind comments. You guys are all so sweet. So I'll sign off now. I'll put this up, and this is the McAllister. This is my David Crosby guitar. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Don't get depressed. I know I talk about some heavy stuff, but it's the time for that. We'll laugh about this next year if everything works out. Or I'll be broadcasting from some foreign land, because I'm out of here. Anyway, peace. Thanks for listening.